to another episode of Tiny Kitchen. This is a very special episode today because the recipe isn't so tiny at all. To celebrate the release of Never an Amish Bride, we here at Tiny Kitchen decided to make a whole Amish meal. This Amish meal is based on a scene in Never an Amish Bride where Lucas, the hero of the story, makes a surprise dinner for Esther, the heroine. Now there's something you need to know about Lucas first. When he was 16 years old, he left on his Rumspringa, but he didn't come back for 10 years. While he was away, he admits that he lived non-Amish. Not only was he addicted to TV, but especially to the Food Network. What Lucas made for Esther was his spin on Paula Deen's pork chops with garlic and honey glazed pears. His spin probably means that he simplified the recipe. Here on Tiny Kitchen, we're gonna dumb it down even more. He also made Esther skin on mashed red potatoes. He also made her pickles. Now, he does admit to buying the pickles. The store that he bought them at was right next to the display of her homemade soap. Lucas also made homemade bread with homemade honey butter. For those of you who've been watching Tiny Kitchen since the beginning, you'll remember that episode 2, I taught you how to make easy French loaf bread. And for dessert, Esther actually made warm sliced apples with cinnamon and sugar. So those are the foods that are going to compile this very special episode about Amish home-cooked meals. Now, my first obvious question is, with a meal so big and complicated, where do I start first? The pork chops shouldn't take too long. The bread. Okay, the bread. We'll start with the bread. I actually made the batch yesterday morning and I saved half of it for today. So it's pretty cold. You can see it's just gonna make just one little French loaf. I'm gonna put it on the counter on the baking sheet that it's going to bake on, and I'm just gonna let it warm up from the fridge and maybe rise and puff up a little bit. Preheat the oven to 350. It still feels very nice. Wake up that dough a little bit. Just let it warm up and raise for a second. While that's going on, I say we start the homemade honey butter. I'm assuming we should start this task with some softened butter. So it looks like it's probably 3 or 4 tablespoons. Hey, Peanut. Peanut, do you want some? My dog loves licking the butter wrapper. Do you want some? I'm just gonna add some honey. I'm sure I could look up a recipe that says how much, but I'm just gonna guess. And it says to mix with a hand beater, but this is so soft, I'm just gonna use a little whisk. I think that looks pretty good. Some of the recipes that I read said something about powdered sugar, so let's just do that. Apparently it makes it more spreadable. Probably a little sweeter too. I don't know, maybe half a teaspoon. Where's the bowl? Where's the bowl? The recipe also calls for some sea salt, but it also called for unsalted butter, and I used regular salted butter. So we're just gonna leave that out. More honey. And my motto is basically always more honey. That is some good stuff. The oven just beeped, which means it's preheated at 350 and it's ready for the bread to go in. And we're gonna cook it for 15 to 20 minutes. Okay, I think next we're gonna start boiling the potatoes for the skin on red mashed potatoes. I have this bag of red and white potatoes with the skin on. So I think that's gonna be okay. While we're waiting for that pesky little pot of water to boil for the potatoes, I'm gonna start getting out the ingredients to make the glaze that's gonna go on the pork chops. potatoes now are at a successful rolling boil. So we're gonna work on the ingredients that go in the glaze. It calls for 6 cloves of minced garlic, but if you're a fan of Tiny Kitchen, you know that I don't do garlic that way. Okay. Yeah, come on in. Oh my goodness, are you okay? So 6 cloves is probably gonna be, I don't know. We like garlic in this house, so. That maybe looks like a tablespoon and a half. Works for me. Next is apple cider vinegar, 1 teaspoon. No, I've got a teaspoon. I didn't find a teaspoon, but I found a 1/4 teaspoon, so we'll fill this up 4 times. 1/3 cup of honey. I've got a 1/4 cup, so I'll just fill this up all the way and a little bit more. 4 tablespoons of butter. I wonder if the Amish can have microwaves. I don't think so. The timer just went off, so the bread should be ready. Talk about rustic. Ooh. I'm running out of room on my stove because my kitchen is tiny, remember? This also calls for some fresh rosemary. I don't have any, but I do have fresh thyme, so that'll have to do. While the potatoes are still boiling, it's time to prepare the pork chops. Thanks to TV Magic, I'm ready to start the potatoes. And then we just gotta kind of smash them up. I'm not very good at it, people. Butter. My hand mixer is very loud and quite jacked up. So I'm just gonna use one little beater, and while it's going, I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you my life history. Now it's not working at all. So it turns out that my hand mixer is even jackier than I thought. The potatoes are going to be very, very Amish, which means hardly touched by, barely touched by a hand mixer, mostly just hand whipped. I think they're gonna taste okay. You can see the skin's on, and I think that's the most important part of this. It's the fact that it's potatoes that are mashed with the skin on. I think that's a total win. I think we are finally ready to start the entree, the pork chops. According to my non-recipe, after the skillet gets hot, you want to add about 2 tablespoons extra virgin olive oil. Calls for 4 pork chops, and these are a little wimpy. They're the thickest cut that I could find, so it'll have to work. On the patio? You want to go on the patio? Sit. Good girl. Woo! Sizzle, sizzle. Yeah. I'm just going to transfer these onto a plate because I am not finished using this pan. I'm going to pull it off because it's really hot and turn it down to medium. Woo! Nothing like cooking. I covered with a little lid just to keep them warm while I work on the sauce. It looks like the pan has sufficiently cooled down from medium-high to medium, so we're going to add some butter and some chicken broth just to kind of get all the bits off the bottom of the pan, and then I'm going to add the garlic glaze. It also needs to reduce and thicken so it's more like a sauce. I turned up the heat a little bit so it can start to reduce. The buzzer tells us that it is now time to add the pork chops back in. I let this saute about 4 to 5 minutes, just so it thickened up a little bit. I'm actually just gonna kind of flip these over just so they can get all dreamy, like it's marinade. So cute. Now the exciting part is they go back in the oven. They're going to go in a 400 degrees oven for 7 to 10 minutes. Bye-bye, little guys. Good luck to you. With all of that going on the stove and in the oven, it's time to prepare the dessert. Sliced warm apples with cinnamon and sugar. My apples are all clean and washed, so it's time to start chopping. I know the book didn't call for it, but I think I'm gonna add a little bit of honey. The pork chops have about 17 more seconds in the oven. As soon as they come out, these are going in. That looks pretty dang good, doesn't it? I just flipped them over in the sauce because it says to broil them for about 2 minutes. So I guess I turn the temperature up to 500. I'm cheating a little bit. I'm nuking the apples just to get them a little bit soft at first because the pork chops are still broiling. As my father would say, those look like they're straight from Yumsville. I suppose all we need to do is start to plate. I think that'll do it. To the plate we go. And we obviously cannot forget the vegetable, as we always have to have something green on our plate. I added a little more glaze to the pork chops and even some over the mashed potatoes because it is yum. The baked apples are still steaming from the oven. So let's just dish some of those up for our Amish dessert. I tell you the truth, I'm probably going to end up adding some more honey and cinnamon sugar because that's how this Amish girl rolls. Topped off with a big glass of milk. This is sure to satisfy any Amish first date. I just couldn't wait to try. Too bad my husband doesn't come home for another 5 hours. I'm afraid this Amish meal will be all gone. And just like that, we're all out of time on another fabulous episode of Tiny Kitchen. Don't forget, Never an Amish Bride is out now. Now who's gonna do all my dishes?